The day my mother-in-law handed me a bucket and said, "Since you're already here, you might as well clean the bathrooms," I simply smiled. I did not argue. I did not cry. I just looked at her, nodded, and carried the bucket down the hallway. If someone had walked into that house at that moment, they would have thought I was the family's housekeeper instead of their daughter-in-law. Sometimes I wonder how I let things become that way. My name is Grace, and for nearly 12 years I believed that keeping the peace was more important than standing up for myself. I thought that if I worked harder, loved more, and stayed patient, one day my husband's family would finally accept me. I was wrong. When I married Daniel, I didn't marry for money or status. I married because he was kind. He listened when I spoke. He made me laugh after long days at work. Most of all, he made me feel safe. His parents were different. The first time I met them, they looked me up and down as if they were judging every piece of clothing I wore. His mother forced a smile. "So," she said, "you're the woman who stole our son's heart." She laughed after saying it, but somehow it didn't sound like a joke. His father barely looked at me. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. "They'll come around," he whispered. I believed him. After the wedding, Daniel and I bought a small house about 30 minutes away from his parents. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I filled it with little things that made it feel warm. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, family pictures on the walls, homemade soup on cold evenings. I dreamed about hosting holidays there one day, but every holiday belonged to his parents, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday. His mother expected everyone to gather at her house, and every visit followed the same pattern. The women cooked. The men watched television. The grandchildren played outside. I did everything. I washed vegetables, prepared desserts, set the table, served everyone's food, cleared the dishes, washed every plate. By the time everyone finished eating, I was too tired to enjoy dessert. No one noticed, or maybe they noticed and simply didn't care. Whenever I sat down for a moment, my mother-in-law always found another task. "Grace, could you refill everyone's drinks?" "Grace, the trash is full." "Grace, the bathroom needs fresh towels." It never ended. What hurt the most wasn't the work. It was how invisible I felt. No one ever asked if I wanted to sit and talk. No one saved me a seat in the living room. The family laughed together while I stood in the kitchen washing another sink full of dishes. Daniel tried to help sometimes. Whenever he stood beside me with a towel in his hands, his mother would quickly interrupt. "Oh, Daniel," she would say, "the men are watching the game. Go relax." And he usually did. He would give me an apologetic smile before walking away. At first, I told myself it wasn't his fault. He had grown up believing this was normal. But year after year, normal became painful. One rainy Sunday afternoon, I arrived early to help prepare lunch for the entire family. As soon as I walked through the front door, my mother-in-law didn't even say hello. She handed me an apron. "The potatoes still need peeling." An hour later, she asked me to mop the kitchen floor. Then she sent me upstairs to dust the guest rooms. Finally, just before everyone arrived, she placed a cleaning bucket into my hands. "The downstairs bathroom is a mess," she said. "Please take care of it before the guests get here." I looked at the bucket. Then I looked around the beautiful house. Family photographs covered every wall, smiling faces, birthday parties, anniversaries, vacation memories. I realized something. In every picture, they looked like one happy family. But somehow, I had never truly been part of it. As I quietly carried the bucket toward the bathroom, I had no idea that this would be the last family gathering where I would allow anyone to treat me like a servant. Everything was about to change, and I wish I could tell you that everything changed after that afternoon. It didn't. In fact, things became even harder. I cleaned the bathroom, washed my hands, and walked back into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. My mother-in-law barely looked at me. "Good," she said. "Now could you warm the rolls?" not thank you, not I appreciate your help. Just another job. I nodded because that had become my habit. Saying yes was easier than explaining how much those small moments hurt. As the family gathered around the dining table, I stayed in the kitchen, arranging dishes and carrying serving bowls one by one. Everyone else was already laughing. I could hear stories being shared, grandchildren giggling, and forks clinking against plates. When I finally sat down, almost everyone had finished eating. There was only one empty chair left at the very end of the table. I smiled anyway. I told myself that at least I was there. After lunch, Daniel found me washing another pile of dishes. "You've been in here all day," he said quietly. "I know. You should come sit with us." I looked at the sink full of dirty plates. "Your mom asked me to finish these first." He sighed. "I'll help." Before he could pick up a towel, his mother walked into the kitchen. "Oh, Daniel," she said with a laugh, "leave those dishes. Grace knows where everything goes." He looked at me. For a moment, I hoped he would stay. Instead, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'll make it up to you later." Then he walked away. I finished every dish alone. That evening, as we drove home through the rain, neither of us spoke much. Finally, I broke the silence. "Do you think your parents like me?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "They do. Then why do they treat me differently?" "They're just traditional." I looked out the window. Traditional. That word had become the answer to everything. Traditional meant I cooked. Traditional meant I cleaned. Traditional meant everyone relaxed while I worked. I didn't argue anymore. But something inside me had started to change. A few weeks later, Daniel's younger sister, Melissa, invited everyone to her birthday dinner. I spent 2 days baking her favorite chocolate cake from scratch. When we arrived, Melissa smiled politely and took the cake from my hands. She placed it on the kitchen counter without even opening the box. Later that evening, I noticed another dessert sitting proudly in the middle of the table. "Mom made my favorite pie," Melissa announced. Everyone applauded. No one mentioned the cake I had made. It stayed untouched in the kitchen all night. On the drive home, I stared at the dark road ahead. "I don't think your family even noticed I brought dessert," I said softly. Daniel reached over and held my hand. "I'm sorry." His apology was sincere, but apologies were beginning to feel like tiny bandages on a wound that never had time to heal. The next morning, I opened the refrigerator to put away leftovers. There, sitting on the top shelf, was my untouched cake. We had brought the entire thing back home. Not a single slice had been served. I stood there for a long time, looking at it. Then I quietly cut myself one piece. It tasted wonderful, sweet, soft, made with love. As I sat alone at the kitchen table, eating that first slice, I realized something that brought tears to my eyes. I had spent years trying to earn the love of people who had already decided I would never be enough. No matter how perfectly I cooked, no matter how much I cleaned, no matter how often I stayed silent, nothing I did would change their hearts. For the first time in 12 years, I stopped asking myself how I could make them happy. Instead, I asked a different question. What would happen if I finally started respecting myself? The biggest surprise would come at the next family reunion. That question stayed with me for days. What would happen if I finally respected myself? I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living the way I had for 12 years. The next Sunday, Daniel's mother called. "Grace, we're having everyone over next weekend," she said. "Come early, there will be a lot to prepare." Usually, I would have answered without thinking. "Of course." This time, I took a slow breath. "I'll be there at noon with Daniel." There was a long silence. "But lunch starts at 1, she replied. "I know. I'll need help before everyone arrives." "I'm sorry," I said gently. "I already have plans that morning." The truth was simple. My plan was to enjoy breakfast with my husband, take a walk in the park, and drink coffee without rushing. It wasn't a big plan, but it was my plan. When I ended the call, my hands were shaking. Daniel looked up from his laptop. "Everything okay? I told your mom we'd arrive together." He smiled. "Good." That single word surprised me. Good. He wasn't angry. He wasn't disappointed. For the first time in years, I realized I had been carrying fears that didn't belong to me. The following Saturday morning felt different. Instead of waking before sunrise to bake, clean, and hurry out the door, I made pancakes for Daniel and myself. We ate slowly on the back porch while birds sang in the trees. "I've missed mornings like this," Daniel said. "So have I." When we arrived at his parents' house just before noon, everyone else was already there. My mother-in-law opened the door. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw us. "You're late." "We're right on time," I answered calmly. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked toward the kitchen. I followed, expecting the usual list of chores. Instead, I poured myself a glass of iced tea and sat beside Daniel in the living room. The room became strangely quiet. His father lowered his newspaper. Melissa looked at me with surprise. Even the children stopped talking for a moment. After a few minutes, my mother-in-law appeared in the doorway. "Grace," she called. "The salad still needs to be made." I smiled politely. "I'd be happy to help after I finish my tea." Her eyebrows lifted. "After?" "Yes." She stared at me for several seconds before walking away without another word. Daniel gently squeezed my hand under the table. It was a small gesture, but it gave me courage. When I entered the kitchen a few minutes later, I helped prepare the meal just as I always had. The difference was that I wasn't doing everything alone. When Melissa asked where the serving bowls were, I smiled. "I'm not sure." "Your mom probably knows." When Daniel's brother finished eating and left his plate on the table, I didn't rush to pick it up. He eventually carried it to the sink himself. No one complained. No one argued. The world didn't fall apart because I stopped trying to hold it together by myself. That afternoon, while everyone sat outside talking, I joined them instead of hiding in the kitchen. The conversation moved from childhood memories to old family vacations. For once, I laughed with everyone else. It felt unfamiliar. It also felt wonderful. As the sun began to set, my mother-in-law quietly walked over to me. "I noticed you weren't as helpful today," she said. Her words were careful, but they still stung. I met her eyes. "I helped with lunch. I helped clean the table. I just didn't do everything." She folded her arms. "Family should help family." "I agree," I answered softly. "That's why everyone should help." She didn't know what to say. She turned and walked back inside. Daniel watched the whole conversation from across the yard. Later, as we drove home, he reached for my hand. "I've never seen you so calm," he said. I looked out the window at the fading sunset. I finally realized something. "What?" "I don't need anyone's permission to value myself." Neither of us knew it then, but those simple words were about to change everything. Just 3 weeks later, our entire family would gather for the biggest reunion we had ever planned. And before that weekend was over, a truth hidden for years would come into the light, leaving everyone in complete silence. The family reunion was held at a large lakeside lodge that Daniel's oldest cousin had rented for the weekend. Nearly 40 relatives came. Some traveled from other states. Others I had never met before. Everyone seemed excited to catch up, share old memories, and enjoy time together. As soon as we arrived, my mother-in-law started giving instructions. "Grace, could you help set up the buffet?" Before I could answer, Daniel spoke. "We'll help together." His mother looked surprised but nodded without saying anything. We carried trays to the dining hall, arranged chairs, and placed flowers on the tables. This time, I noticed something different. Daniel's cousins, uncles, and even a few teenagers were helping too. For once, the work was shared. It felt nice. Later that afternoon, everyone gathered for a family photo. Children laughed while grandparents found their places in the front row. I stood near the back beside Daniel. As the photographer adjusted the camera, Daniel's Aunt Linda walked over to me. "You must be Grace," she said warmly. "I've heard so much about you." I smiled politely. "I hope only good things." Linda looked genuinely confused. "I've always heard you're the one who keeps every family gathering running. Your mother-in-law says she couldn't manage without you." I didn't know how to respond. Before I could speak, another cousin joined the conversation. "I remember hearing that Grace loves organizing everything. She volunteers because she enjoys taking care of everyone." Those words stayed with me. Volunteers, enjoys it. For 12 years, that was the story everyone had been told. Not that I was expected to do everything, not that I was treated differently. They believed I happily chose every task. That evening, after dinner, everyone gathered in the main hall. Someone suggested sharing favorite family memories. People laughed as they told funny stories from childhood vacations and holiday dinners. Then Daniel's grandmother smiled at me. "Grace," she said gently, "you've been part of this family for many years now. Tell us one of your favorite memories." The room became quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. For a moment, I considered making up a cheerful story. That was what the old Grace would have done. Instead, I took a slow breath. "I honestly don't know if I have a favorite memory," I said softly. The room fell completely silent. "I've spent most family gatherings in the kitchen." No one interrupted. I thought if I worked hard enough, I'd eventually feel like I belonged. So I cooked, cleaned, served meals, washed dishes, and tried my best to make everyone comfortable. I looked toward my mother-in-law. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone. I'm only saying it because Grandma asked me to be honest. Daniel reached for my hand. "I loved serving this family," I continued. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot that I was family too." Several people lowered their eyes. Linda looked shocked. One cousin quietly whispered, "We had no idea." Daniel finally stood. "I should have spoken much sooner," he admitted. "I kept telling myself things would change on their own. They didn't. I'm sorry, Grace." His voice trembled. "I watched my wife carry responsibilities that should have belonged to all of us." No one spoke for several long seconds. Then Daniel's father slowly stood up. He looked older than I had ever noticed. "We failed you," he said quietly. "I saw what was happening, and I convinced myself it was simply our family tradition." He turned toward his wife. "We both should have done better." My mother-in-law remained seated. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time since I had known her, she looked at me without pride or criticism, only regret. In that quiet room, surrounded by relatives who had finally learned the truth, I realized something unexpected. I hadn't spoken to win an argument. I had spoken because the truth deserved a place at the table. And sometimes, one honest conversation can begin healing wounds that silence only makes deeper. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, I sat alone on the porch overlooking the lake. The water was still. The stars reflected on its surface like tiny lights, reminding me that even after the darkest days, beauty could still be found. I heard the screen door open behind me. It was my mother-in-law. She walked slowly, holding 2 mugs of tea. Without saying a word, she handed one to me and sat beside me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology." I looked at her but stayed quiet. "I've been thinking about everything you said tonight," she continued. "At first, I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say I never meant to hurt you." She lowered her eyes. "But intentions don't erase pain." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I treated you like someone who was supposed to serve this family instead of someone who belonged to it. I'm ashamed of that." Those were words I had never expected to hear. "I kept telling myself it was just how our family worked," she said softly. "My mother treated me the same way, and somewhere along the line I convinced myself that it was normal." I reached over and gently placed my hand on hers. "It may have been normal," I said, "but it wasn't kind." She nodded. You're right. The next morning, everyone gathered for breakfast before leaving the lodge. I walked toward the kitchen out of habit. Before I could pick up a serving spoon, Daniel's father smiled. Not today, Grace. He handed me a plate instead. You sit with the family. Daniel's brother carried the coffee. Melissa arranged the fruit. The grandchildren helped set the table while Daniel's cousins washed dishes after breakfast. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel like the help. I felt like family. As everyone prepared to leave, Daniel's grandmother hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. It takes courage to tell the truth with kindness. Those words stayed with me all the way home. A week later, my mother-in-law called again. This time, her voice sounded different. We're having Sunday dinner, she said, then she laughed softly. And before you ask, everyone has been assigned a dish to bring. Your father-in-law is even grilling. I couldn't help smiling. What would you like me to bring? Just yourselves, she answered. And if you'd like, maybe one of your chocolate cakes. When we arrived that Sunday, I almost didn't recognize the kitchen. People were cooking together. Someone was washing vegetables. Someone else was setting the table. Daniel's father was laughing outside while flipping burgers. Melissa was teaching her daughter how to make mashed potatoes. No one handed me an apron. No one pointed toward a sink full of dishes. Instead, my mother-in-law walked over and wrapped her arms around me. I'm glad you're here, she said. Simple words, but they meant everything. After dinner, we all sat together in the living room, talking about old memories and making new ones. For the first time, I wasn't listening from another room. I was part of the conversation. On the drive home, Daniel reached for my hand. I almost lost something precious because I stayed silent, he admitted. I squeezed his hand gently. We both learned something. What was that? Love isn't shown by how much you can endure, I said. It's shown by how willing people are to respect one another. He smiled. I'll never forget that. Neither would I looking back now. I don't remember the endless dishes or the heavy buckets as much as I remember the moment I finally found my voice. Speaking honestly didn't destroy my family. It gave us the chance to become a better one. Sometimes, people don't realize they're hurting someone until the silence ends. And sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't sacrificing yourself over and over again. Sometimes it's quietly saying, I deserve a seat at this table too. That simple truth changed my life forever. And every time our family gathers now, we all cook together, laugh together, clean together, and leave together. Because a family is strongest when no one is treated like a servant, and everyone is treated with love, dignity, and respect.